We got a job to do tonight. Go out there, you wrestle your heart out.
When we can headline arenas, I know that we can.
My main event is heavyweights and then male.
Let's show them how we do it in the South.
I want us secure as equal partners.
Then do what's right for business.
All the tickets you two ever sold had your name on them.
This is my destiny.
Queen of the Ring. Rated PG.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Cuson. On tonight's episode, we are going to be discussing a lot of Toni Storm. We are going to be discussing her series of matches with Mariah May that have taken place over the last year or so. We will also be talking about a relatively new movie release, that being Queen of the Ring, essentially a biopic about legendary professional wrestler Mildred Burke. As always, please follow us. Follow me on BlueSky at JeromeC1985. You can also find us on YouTube. Please click the bell icon to get notifications. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. Please leave a 4 or 5-star review so people can continue to find out what we're doing here on the Not Content Podcast as part of the From the Queue Podcasting Network. My co-host, as always, is Brian. Brian here tonight. I feel some rage building based on our pre-show meeting. I have a feeling a rant is forthcoming.
Well, look, I mean, I went into this movie with the highest hopes and intentions. Like, I thought I was really hyped for this movie, and I couldn't believe the delivery I got. Like, as soon as I saw Josh Lucas, I was like, oh, this is the casting that we're going with, huh? But then we have Walton Goggins come in as the promoter, and he elevates the movie to a whole different level. And then when he's gone, it just goes back to TV level. So, yeah, this was a disappointment, to say the least. And I can't believe the inaccuracies that were in this movie, considering that Jim Cornette, the person who is all obsessed with getting things accurate in wrestling movies and shit like that, stars in the movie as well, yet he just closed his eyes and took a paycheck. We'll get into some of these inaccuracies.
If you give the man a paycheck, Brian, that's all it takes. Like, he will happily ignore things if you give him a check.
See, I thought the check was going to be too small for him because this movie had no budget, and it grossed $700,000.
I mean, it clearly had enough of a budget to make him the executive producer. I have to believe that Jim Cornette did not put any of his money in it, and that him being an executive producer is kind of some sort of a payoff. Like, I cannot imagine a scenario where that otherwise would be true. But this movie is a disaster in so many ways. I think there are some good casting choices, but I definitely feel that TV vibe. And even though you and I both love Walton Goggins, let's be honest, this still very much has the feeling like even he is much more known for TV acting than movie acting. I look at Emily Bett Rickards. Look, I think she does a very good job in this role, but I will always associate her with Arrow and the that universe. And to me, she just gives off the vibe of being a TV actor. And I don't want that to be insulting, because I think that, I think of Kelsey Grammer as a TV actor and not a movie actor. And Frasier and Cheers are two of my favorite shows. So I don't want it to be insulting, but I think I would much rather watch her on a TV show that is well put together than see her try to lead a movie, which I don't think necessarily worked. And to be fair, as you mentioned, the script writing is just awful. This is a movie that tries to be everything and ultimately ends up being nothing. I saw the runtime of 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I was horrified. What we end up with, Brian, is we end up with a movie that is simultaneously trying to be like in the vibe of a musical biopic. I think this follows a lot of the patterns, because we see practically 20 years of Mildred Burke's life portrayed on screen. And you're also seeing an underdog sports story, because even though professional wrestling is not real in terms of it is predetermined, it is scripted, we still get multiple matches that are treated as shoot fights, including the last one. And the funny thing to me about all of this is that this is the second time this has happened, where I think back to Iron Claw. Iron Claw is a movie also came out and said that wrestling was fake. But every time they went to the ring and showed a match, it's like it was treated as being real in some way. And I understand, like, you are trying to create action in a wrestling movie, and you're going to have actual wrestling going on, but like that's not where the storytelling in a movie is almost never going to take place in the actual ring. It's going to happen backstage. And I think that's one of the things that this movie misses. I think it's, quite frankly, one of the things that Iron Claw misses. I think Iron Claw is almost too focused on what's happening in the ring with Von Erichs and not enough outside the ring. And I feel the same way here. I think the story of Mildred Burke is the fact that she is a success story unto herself. She is, broadcasted as kind of the first $1 million female athlete ever. And I think if you are going to promote that, then I think you need to put more concentration on that. I think this movie is also going for a League of Their Own vibes, and I don't think that works either, because I think that, again, this is a biopic that tries to be kind of an ensemble when they start bringing in some of the other female wrestlers, which I don't have an issue with, but it just feels like they're really leaning into that element. And of course, you have the tragedy of Deborah Ann Wool, who's probably best known for Daredevil as Gladys Gillum, and her tragic passing in the movie. And it is treated as a big deal, but it just feels like we're constantly lacking in focus and really lacking in the story. And I was just incredibly frustrated. And that doesn't even get into some of the individual script issues with poor dialogue and all that stuff. So Brian, I know that you want to rant and rave about some of the specific pieces of dialogue, but let's focus on kind of the big picture. What was good? What was bad?
Well, I did like the costumes. I'll give it that. I do think some of the lighting was kind of off on some of the scenes, but I think that's just because they were trying to do some more of that natural 1930s, 1940s kind of lighting. So I guess that is kind of forgivable. But this idea that Mildred Burke was like this giant star, but they film all the wrestling scenes in these small ass like gyms and auditoriums, it just kills it, because it's supposed to be like she's larger than life and like she's worthy of going into Madison Square Garden, but you're still like filming the last match of the movie in a small ass auditorium in front of like 200 people. So that kills the vibe of this giant match. It's like, look at Rocky. They went into an actual like giant arena and filmed it there, and they couldn't do that. It's like, come on, man. Like, why do we have to do it like Young Rock, where Young Rock is like so small scale, where everything's supposed to be larger scale, and you do it on TV level budgeting scale, which is exactly what happened. So that's kind of my.
I would almost excuse Young Rock because it is a TV show. Like,
well, I'm just annoyed with that. I don't excuse it in this for sure, because.
But I mean, in a movie, I think you have to capture the scale. Like,
how many people do you think were the most like attended in this movie? Like the attendance in terms of like one of the matches, like 100, 200?
I mean, it looked like an indie show, absolutely.
Which is
and that's fine for early in the movie, but no, it's not.
And then this idea that she's this draw, it doesn't look like she's a draw when she's in front of these small like crowds. You know what I'm saying? So that was kind of like conflicting with me, because I wanted to see her as being the larger than life star in all these different arenas, but then she goes into they film at all these small buildings, so it was kind of like, come on. The budget is just like screaming right there. And then I think you're shooting yourself in the foot when you cast Emily Bett Rickards right off the bat, because look, I know I haven't watched much Arrow, but I did see the crossovers, and from all my friends and a lot of online, discourse, she seems to be one of the more off-putting, annoying characters in that universe, in the Arrowverse. So I think that casting is just even more of a negative when you do that. When you cast an actor that's not really well liked, you know what I'm saying? So it's nothing against her. It's just the writing in Arrow was just, corny and cheesy and not really elevating her character. In this case, it's like, it's a TV star coming in, doing a major motion picture role and not getting the larger than life vibe that you're supposed to get on the screen. So I think that's where the casting is kind of missed. And then when you cast Josh Lucas, I don't know, you're just asking if, again, he's like the guy that, not lost his career, but he lost his mainstream stardom, I think, in Hulk. He's done Yellowstone. He's done all these different things. But again, that's, TV. And then he's still known as like the guy that's the Home Depot voice guy. So I don't know, man. I think casting him was a mistake. But I think Walton Goggins was perfect as Jack Pfeffer. Jim Cornette was the NWA commissioner, which is crazy to me because Jim Cornette, my goodness, just loves to just pick on all these not the actors, but pick on all these wrestlers that are in this movie and shared screen time with them. So I was just, befuddled. Like I was waiting. I don't know. Was there like a story that didn't come out where Toni Storm kicked his ass on set? Maybe they weren't on set together, but just something like that. It was just kind of like baffling just seeing Jim Cornette in the credits, considering all the shitty things he said about a lot of these women. So I don't know. It's just very.
I mean, Jim Cornette is a grifter, and he will go where the money takes him. He will have no problem being around these women if there's a paycheck involved. But the moment that he can extort money for himself because through his podcast to shit on these people, like he's gonna do it. I mean, I don't even think it's that interesting. I mean, he's just gonna go where the money takes him, and I think that's a lot of with these people who are in podcasting. I would throw Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff into the same boat. Like they cannot be employed by wrestling companies anymore, so they're gonna grift. And I mean, look, I think Tony Khan has a lot of flaws, but I think he sees all of these individuals for who they are, and I give him a lot of credit for calling them out the way he has on occasion. I think for me, the thing about this movie that I think could have worked is I think that the movie should have been focused on one match or 1 year or focusing on that smaller scale element. Like I think if you get into the beginning of Mildred Burke's career and just really focus and hone in on that, then I don't think you get exposed by having her in these quote unquote big arenas, but it still looks like there's 200 people. Like I think you could get away with the smaller scale stuff if you don't upscale everything that happens basically in the second half. And I think the other thing, I think Josh Lucas, I don't know what movie he's in, but he is he becomes a cartoon character, and I don't think it works. I think there's no consistency to his character whatsoever. I think his performance is actively bad at times. I think his dialogue in particular is bad. It's just, it fundamentally doesn't work. And I think he is one of the biggest problems with this movie because, again, I think Emily I think she's okay. I would strongly push back on the sentiment of her being an annoying character. I have no doubt that some people do think that, but I always thought that I thought she was fine in her role. And I think she had really good chemistry with Stephen Amell. And I personally always liked her character. So I kind of reject that everybody thinks this. I mean, again, certainly there are some that do, but in terms of this role, like again, I think she's good. I think if you surrounded her with a better movie, this could have definitely been serviceable, passable. I don't know that it was ever going to be a classic, but I mean, I think the story itself is worth telling. I think telling the story of Mildred Burke and her rise as a female wrestler and all the things that she had to go through. I think there's a really interesting story to tell, but I just don't know that this is the movie that's going to tell it. And would this have benefited if this was a female director and a female screenwriter? I absolutely think that. I think that one of the big problems is you have a male director, male screenwriter, Jim Cornette's involved, so you're not getting something that fully fleshes out her character and really fleshes out the issues with women. I think the way that they speak about it is very broad, pun not intended. But I think the way that they classify the issues feels very typical. It feels like something you would get in a movie from the 70s or the 80s, or maybe even the early 90s. But it just doesn't. It feels like we are way past in terms of the storytelling. I'm not going to pretend like there are not regressive issues that women are facing, but I think in terms of storytelling, I think we've moved beyond a lot of the way that this story frames the issues that the women are dealing with.
Yeah, I think this would have been better off as a show, but then when I say that, I think in my head, like, why does that sound familiar? Oh, because it's Glow. So Glow, to me, does the formula what this movie's trying to do in a much better pace because it's a show, and it had 3 seasons. It allowed a lot of characters to get shine, a lot of story arcs to get some closure, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of the story arcs in this kind of like kind of wrap up quickly, and it's like, why did you marry this guy in the first place? Blah blah blah. So there's a lot of issues with the story in terms of like being too like on the nose, like you said, like a musical biopic. It was just too on the nose of like the first season of Glow, where it's like you see the first 20 minutes of the movie in training and all that thing, and it's like, oh, this is exactly like Glow. So it's just like, okay, maybe this would have been better as an HBO show with better production, and you can still have the same cast. And maybe just switch out the directors and have female writers and female directors, and I think that would have been much better.
So, have you seen the movie Walk Hard?
Oh yeah, I'm a kind of a big fan of that movie and the soundtrack, to be honest.
So there's the beginning of the movie when his character is, and they make mention in light of the fact that he's going to think about his whole life leading up to that moment, and I couldn't help but think when Mildred Burke is in the ring at the beginning of the movie and it's the last fight, and that basically is the same thing as we see in Walk Hard. It literally. Like, they don't make the dialogue that clear, but it feels exactly like that moment. It's like they're cutting to this, and then she is in the moment that she's sitting on the stool, like she's contemplating her life up to that point.
Yeah, a little too on the nose, like I said, man. A lot of these biopics follow that same formula only because that's kind of the way the story is naturally structured, but because you got a variety of characters in this movie that could have been so easily explored. They just went with this traditional route and just kind of kept things on the nose.
I mean, they literally introduced a group of black women, and they literally are kind of used as window dressing. And it's like, you are literally doing the thing.
That's exactly what happened in A League of Their Own, the movie, right? Exactly what happened.
It's the exact thing.
Oh my goodness! But not only that, the story kind of just has these issues in terms of its structure, but I think the dialogue is like, how do I say this? Like if Vince Russo wrote it in the year 2000,
it's really terrible. It's
like
easily
so insider terms that are not like that weren't terms back then. You know what I'm saying? Like okay, for instance, the first time that we see Mildred watching wrestling from the crowd, what is that? Like late 1930s, early 1940s, right? And these two dudes in the crowd are trying to teach her the slang of wrestling. Like, that guy's a heel, that guy's a babyface. Why do they call him a babyface? Because
it's really,
and then it's like no one knows that in 1939, 1940, dude. Unless you're in the business, not two dudes.
Here's what I'll say: if this was in Madison Square Garden in the '60s, maybe I'll buy it.
I'll buy that, but not in front of like a Midwest town, 100 people in the crowd, and this dude is like this smart mark teaching these girls about wrestling. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what kind of dialogue is this?
And I don't buy for a second that, like, even hypothetically, if they were in the business, like, they wouldn't be talking to her like that. I mean, that's why I was literally, I texted somebody. I was like, 5 minutes into this movie, and I hate it already, and it was because of that scene.
I had the same reaction, dude. And then when
it was an immediate turnoff.
And then they keep using these like insider terms as if the audience knows what they mean, but then they kind of have to explain it. But it's at the same time, it's like, no one was talking like that. You know what I'm saying? That language developed over time. So it's just very frustrating. And then at one point in the movie,
not use those terms.
At one point in the movie, there's a press conference, and it's, they're trying to heal it and face it up, right? So Josh Lucas comes up and he starts doing this line read, and all of a sudden I recognize what he's saying, and it's the fucking quote that Scott Hall had in his Hall of Fame speech. The same quote about bad guys. So I'm just like, did this guy just look up a bunch of wrestling clips and like shoot interviews and just fucking assume what wrestling was and not actually grow up as a wrestling fan? Because that's the vibe I'm getting, and that's why I'm just so frustrated with the dialogue in this movie. Because it's like watching an episode of Thunder. You know what I'm saying? Like, which they've been loading on the WCW vault, and I've been playing in the back row playing video games, and it's just laughing my ass off. But it sounds like that kind of insider dialogue that just doesn't gel. And it's so frustrating. And it's just like, dude, no one's talking like this. At least not yet. So, I don't know, man. But kayfabe, yes, was a term back in the 40s, 50s. But, I was surprised that they didn't reveal that term in the carnival scene, as opposed to just some random scene later on in the movie teaching the girls the ropes about wrestling. So, I don't know. And the fact that they got Mae Young in this, and the only thing that you have about Mae Young is that she's a lesbian. They play that up, and that's it. It's like, there's more to Mae Young than just being a lesbian in the business, dude. Like, come on. Like, it was so like frustrating because we know.
I
Mae
mean,
Young
that's
as
the problem when
wrestling
the characters are so underdeveloped. Is you give them one trait, and that's what they are.
fans.
And that's a huge issue.
I couldn't believe it. And then look, I'm not the biggest Karen fan on Daredevil, so when she showed up, I was like, oh no, please just be not what you are in Daredevil season 3.
Again, I think he's fine. I think he's perfectly fine.
Well, the other issue is that she plays a woman that dies, right? She's get killed, like, quote, killed in the ring, right? The person that she actually plays in real life died in 1989.
I mean, I think the problem is that what you have to do, part of what I think works about Glow is that it is an homage to Glow, but it never pretends to be the actual story of Glow. And I think that's what works about it. I think the problem with this movie is you are purporting to tell the bios, you're trying to tell a story of a real person, and you're changing the details to suit your needs. And I just, especially when it comes to wrestling, I don't think that works because people like us who really know the history are going to get mad. And I think that what you brought up is a really good example. An even bigger example is not acknowledging the existence of Chris Von Erich in the Iron Claw. When you do stuff like that, you are really handicapping your movie because you're basically telling wrestling fans that you have either changed the story to suit your own needs or you just don't care. And neither one of those answers is really all that good. I think this movie is extremely flawed. And I don't know. I mean, is there a good movie to be made about Mildred Burke? I don't know. Maybe a documentary would be better. But this movie was, I mean, I really hated this movie at times. And there were other times when I didn't mind it. Again, I liked some of the performances. I liked some of the casting choices. I even liked some of the visual panache of certain scenes. Like, even though there was a limited budget, I think the director showed some signs of life at times, but then he cast himself as Vince McMahon Sr. And I don't know, like, to me, the thing, and I know I acknowledge the thing about Scott Hall was stupid. They used the quote, controversy creates cash. I think that was really bad. But I think the stupidest stuff was them talking about storytelling in wrestling, which is not something that they would be talking about in the 30s and the 40s. At least not, they would not frame it in terms of storytelling. And it's one of the things that really pisses me off about both WWE and AEW are obsessed with telling stories. And the other thing is just Vince McMahon Sr. referencing entertainment. And that is not who Vince McMahon Sr. was ever. Not at all.
He was about making money and booking a year ahead of time and doing all kinds of things that, are kind of unheard of nowadays.
Yes, the WWF was always the showier of the promotions because it was in New York and Boston, but like it was the immigrant company. I mean, Bruno is literally from Italy. He's an immigrant. You got Pedro from Puerto Rico. Like that's what the WWF.
Pedro Morales would not have been over in a lot of other territories. I'm just going to say that now because I think he's a limited worker, but in the New York area, perfect for that punch and kick style where it's like you want that tough guy. But look, I like Pedro Morales for a lot, but I think that's a perfect example of, guys drawing in certain areas, right? So,
I mean, it's fine, I think, but like it was very poor casting, and then you have the shoot fights, which
okay, so explain something to me, like if that was a real shoot fight, why are they doing pro wrestling moves?
I mean, the same thing was did Iron Claw. I mean, Ready to Rumble did it too. Ready to Rumble, they were.
Hey, I think Ready to Rumble is a better movie. To be honest, man, like
I am not going to go out on that limb, but
look, I've seen Ready to Rumble 3 or 4 times. I'm willing to watch it at least another 3 or 4 times in my lifetime, but not this.
Here's the thing: I think Ready to Rumble is trying to be a stupid comedy. This movie is trying to be classy. And I think that Ready to Rumble accomplishes its mission better than this movie does. That's what I'll say.
I'll agree with that because that was supposed to be entertainment. They talk about being entertainment in this movie, but kind of going different directions with it. And then
I'm tired of people talking about telling stories. I mean, that's a general, and that is not just a wrestling thing, but just stop it. Just stop.
The story is finished, I guess. There you go on this. It's a 5 out of 10 for me, and in comparison, I give Ready to Rumble like a 5.5. So that's kind of my mindset in terms of all this. I still think Harlem Nights is a worse movie for sure, but that's kind of the scale we're on. And I hate to say it about this Queen of the Ring movie because I was so hyped going in, like super excited, and looking at the cast, and it looks like they cut out Mickey James.
I don't know that I was excited. I mean, here's what I'll say: Kevin Ford definitely tempered my expectations. So I walked into this with probably lower expectations than you did. But like, I think on the surface, I think doing something like this, an independent production, and you know, again, I think that they did some good casting in this movie, but I just think you really needed to surround this with a better movie, and we didn't get it. Speaking of wrestling and movies, we didn't really talk about Toni Storm in this movie. I mean, I think I think her accent is fine, but she has. I would argue, Brian, Toni Storm has been the MVP of AEW over the course of the last year, and I know that some people are not a huge fan of timeless Toni Storm. But I think the Mariah May feud really brought her character into focus and really gave her the best exposure that she has ever had in her career. Brian, do you want to know a fun fact about Toni Storm and me?
Can I guess that it's the same birthday?
No, it's not. I saw Toni Storm win the Stardom Cinderella tournament in Korakuen Hall in 2017.
Holy shit. So that's when she was like fresh rookie years, like 18 or something. Because she's only like 23, Jerome. Like, she's like a young legend, sort of. And I hate to say the word legend, but man, I think some of her skits and her career or character work, very memorable for generations to come.
She is 29 years old. I think WWE completely blew it with her. And I think that what she has done in the Mariah May feud really elevated her to the point where, I mean, I think even more so than even Mercedes and Jon Moxley. I mean, I think she's absolutely having a fantastic year and is absolutely the main reason that I would even sit down and watch an AEW show right now. I think she is their best champion, and their list of champions, quite frankly, is not very impressive right now. With the in terms of obviously, I will exclude Okada. Well, I mean even Okada hasn't had the best matches, but you know, I look at that list of champions, and Toni Storm to me is number one with a bullet.
I agree, and I think the Mariah May feud has been definitely like on my radar more so than any of the storylines of the last couple of years. And I don't watch WWE anymore, so it's not just me being anti-WWE. It's like I just got sick of it back in 2018, 2019, before even AEW started up. I was just done. So AEW came at the right time for me, and I just kind of stuck my teeth into it. And seeing the rise of Toni Storm, like from the group that she was in with Saraya Knight, and then just developing her own character, and then just doing this weird thing on her own, and then all of a sudden clicking with some of the insider smart marks who are like movie buffs like us, and then using that and then taking it to like a general audience level, I think was the smart move. And
basically a lesbian angle, kind of a sequel to Mickey James and Trish Stratus, except much more successful. They got a lot more space and a lot more room, potential throuple as well, and they went to some different places, and their breakup was extremely memorable because it was basically the biggest moment of Mariah May's career. She wins the Owen Hart Invitational. She uses the shoe, causes Toni Storm to bleed, and I mean the way that they've used blood throughout this feud has been very memorable. I'm generally not a fan of using blood, but I mean the way that they've used it, it's been extremely effective.
Yeah, and it slowly progressed in through the matches too. Like the first one, the blade job wasn't as extreme as the one in LA, but it still had because once you wear white in the ring, it's like a big clue, especially during a big show that we're getting some color, and they were both wearing white, and it just made sense. And it's what you wanted to see because this was leaning towards the blood feud type, and it got more and more personal. And I think that match at All In was just like a really good build up. It wasn't the best of the trilogy, obviously, but I think it had the great in-ring story with it all, and then callbacks with the shoe, which is even more of a callback later on in the third match, which, you know, I love callbacks, so there you go. So I think that first match is like a 7.5 for me, but the build-up was so good because of the turn and this, this false friendship and all that
And
kind of
that
thing.
crowd
And it took
was
so
really
long to get
into
there,
it.
but it was just a perfect setup.
The crowd was fantastic. I would say the crowd was in some ways the best. The best crowd they had was at All In, and I think it's because there was definitely kind of a mixed reaction, and I think Mariah May in some ways kind of got the crowd to turn against her and in favor of Toni Storm, especially. There was a moment when Mariah May slaps her mother, and it's a pretty great moment. And her mom sells better than just about any other AEW star. I'll say that. And I think it's the to me the three matches serve three very different purposes. The first match is Mariah May is a star, and we're going to turn her into a superstar by giving her a dominant victory over our champion. And I think they achieved that goal by having Mariah May just kind of dominate in the end. And, Toni Storm certainly got some hope spots, but I mean, Mariah May wins this match relatively clean, I would say. And I think she is presented as as a legitimate AEW world champion. And it's really impressive the way that they treat her. I think the second match, it's much more clearly they have the third match in their sights, and the first match takes place in August of 2024. The second match doesn't take place for another 6 months, and in between that, Mariah May is able to kind of forge her own path as the AEW world champion. And Toni Storm comes back. She's not timeless anymore. She kind of goes back to her old gimmick, but really it's kind of a ruse to trick Mariah May. And the second match is clearly designed to get Toni Storm the belt back. But I guess Toni Storm has become the master of the small package. And we saw it also play out at the most recent AEW pay-per-view Dynasty. She also won with the small package. And I kind of like that she is winning in many ways and bringing back the small package, not unlike Bryan Danielson used to do during his Ring of Honor title run. But the second match I think was good, but clearly they had the third match in their sights, and they definitely held a lot back. And then the third match, I will argue this until the day I die. This should have been the main event of Revolution, because it was absolutely the best match on the show, and you literally could not have ended the show more perfectly than with them like in a pile of blood, and the camera does like this huge dolly back when you see the end. That should have been the lasting image of that show.
Well, in terms of the Australia match, I think the build-up was my favorite of the three because of the switching of the characters and the line of like, who's better at playing yourself than yourself, or whatever that line was. It was such a like Hollywood line, and I was just thinking like, this is so on point for the Toni Storm character. And then to like kind of switch it up in that angle where she just kind of says, "Fuck it, you figured me out, and then I'm gonna fucking get you anyway." So she just drops the fucking old Toni Storm gimmick and starts going to timeless Toni Storm because she just lost it. Like, that was some real good character development there, and I think that second match was like my favorite of the build-ups. It feels like, I know you already said Bryan Danielson, but this trilogy does feel like more Shima versus Danielson to me. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of like the wait time between matches, and the first one had this like a lot of consequences, and then the second one ended on kind of like a DQ almost. But this one, in this case, Toni Storm gets the title back, and the third one is the bloodbath, just like Morishima and Danielson was in New York. So yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's very similar to that kind of 3-chapter trilogy that some of these bookers like to do. And I think the second match was like really well done in terms of like a TV main event for like a TV special on a Saturday in front of this big receptive audience in Australia, and they just loved Toni Storm down there, and it just worked. And it didn't have to be like a 5-star match that they were going to do later on. Like, it was a perfect TV main event to change the title on the babyface, to set up a third match and make it seem like they're still left on the table. And that's exactly what they did. And when they did the match in LA, I was just so excited. And I was talking to Jerome before I went to the show, saying that this should main event. And I think what happened was, if this did go on last, I feel like people would still criticize it anyway, because it's just people criticizing AEW for the sake of. Like, this match was 15 minutes, the third match, right? I feel like if this went on last or something like that, they would have said, "Oh, this main event was too short. AEW doesn't know how to plan and time their shows out right. It was too short, and just totally, overlooked the fact that it was
I think 15 minutes for this match was perfect. I would argue that in some ways Toni Storm's limitations are actually becoming her strength because her having 15-minute matches actually gives her the opportunity to tell a good story in that time. And a lot of these matches, especially AEW pay-per-views, are way too long. And I think the fact that Toni Storm is basically only, Toni Storm and Mariah May, their three matches each went about 15 minutes. I think that's why the matches are good.
I agree, and I think that third match being there live was such a moment in time, like just seeing all the violence and just being like, because
it's electric. It's genuinely, and it's not good because the violence makes sense with everything they've done prior. That's why the violence works. That's why the match is good. Having a violent match, you could do a ladder spot in a match, and it doesn't make sense. I'm referring to the Shane Strickland John Moxley main event at Dynasty. You could do that spot and have it not make sense, and it sucks. In this case, they do the champagne bottle thing, and it works because of who they are as characters. And Mariah May is screaming and because she's in pain, and Toni Storm's all pissed off, so it just works. I was just such a huge fan of the way that they executed the violence, and I think it really worked out well. And it didn't feel extreme. It didn't feel obscene either. I know that some people want to criticize blood, and certainly I'm happy to do that at certain points. But it just really felt like if you're going to do a bloody brawl, you need to do it when you set up this feud the way that you have. And that's why I think it works.
Absolutely. And the thing was, going into the match, I was talking with my friends, and they were thinking, is this going to be a Hollywood backlot brawl like Goldust and fucking Piper?
What a terrible idea that would have been.
I know. And I was thinking, no, they can't do that. And then once the match started, we looked around, it was oh, it's a weapons match, hardcore, we get it. And then once it started going, man, it just never stopped. And I think that was a good choice to have this nonstop brawl, very little breathing room, except when they probably get in the ring and take a breather for 30 seconds and then just go right back into it. And all the spots were, they were well, timed and well placed. I think everyone, there was no major injuries coming out of this. I don't think so, at least. But I think the Crimson Mask has always been, it's one of those things in wrestling that people are either disgusted by or just mind blown by the amount of blood that comes out of someone's head in a short amount of time. Case in point,
Toni Storm blades herself very differently than I think a lot of other male wrestlers do. She blades herself in a way that is not going to leave scars. I don't think, at least the way that I see it. And again, I don't think she's going to do a lot of bleeding. She does not strike me as the person who's just going to be like John Moxley and just open up every single time. She's going to open up when there's a purpose.
I think so too, and I think that she made the right decision in this feud to do so at the right time. She didn't bleed in the Megan Bayne match, which is a good decision because it's not at that level yet. So I think this is a 10 out of 10, and being there live was just a special moment. And also being at the same, that was Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay killing it in the cage match too that same night. So again, that night was just so incredible. But yeah, I think if it, I wish it did go on last, but I understand why it didn't go on last. And to be honest, the negativity towards that main event between Copeland and Moxley, I think, was kind of overblown because being there live, it's I've seen a crowd turn on a main event. I was there at WrestleMania when they shit on Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. That was turning on a main event. The crowd, in this case, the crowd was just kind of waiting for an angle to happen because we all knew Christian was somewhere around. So I think
that's that's AEW's problem now is that they've fallen into the TNA trap of the match doesn't really start until the ref bump happens, and I think that's a huge problem.
Well, it was weird because I was sitting next to my buddy, and he's one of those people that loves sports entertainment. He's I want a ref bump. I want a ref bump. I'm waiting for the ref bump.
I hate that shit.
But to each his own. So I kind of get it. But in terms of this trilogy, I think you can even go back to it in a year. I feel like this was kind of the level of that Magnum TA Tully thing where you could easily go back to it. They just never had time to go back to it. But you never know down the line.
I really hope that Mariah May stays. I know that her contract is apparently up, and look, Tiffany Stratton is in WWE. I don't know that there's space for both of them. I really hope she stays because I think there's so many different things that you can do with her. You can have them team up again, do a turn at some point, or you could roll this back at some point, and I think that would be really exciting to do this match 18 to 24 months from now to do this match again. And maybe you reverse it. Mariah May's the babyface at that point. I think there's ways of doing it. I as much as I hated the experience of watching Queen of the Ring, I definitely have enjoyed the experience of going back and watching that trilogy because it's one of the best things that I've seen in wrestling in the last year. And it's WWE and AEW are both a mixed bag at best, and a lot of what they do frustrates me. But I really enjoyed the Mariah May Toni Storm feud a lot.
I also want to recommend that I wish I wrote the YouTube user's name down, but she uploaded the Australia match from a fan perspective, which I was shocked that AEW hasn't caught on to that and copyright strike that yet. But I watched it as like a different perspective, you know what I'm saying, from like a crowd perspective. So that was a different experience. I recommend checking that out as well, because you can see it from like the TV production side versus what the crowd actually saw. So that was really cool to experience that match again from a different perspective.
All right, and so next week we are going to be discussing. We're going to be going back into the baseball world. We are going to be reviewing 3 different documentaries. We're going to be finishing off our conversation about baseball. We're going to discuss the 10th inning. We are also going to be discussing the life and times of Fernando Valenzuela as well. And I think it's only fitting though next week. Given when the episode is going to come out, do you realize what day Jackie Robinson Day is, Brian? As a Los Angeles person, you absolutely should know.
I forget the exact date, but I keep seeing the commercials for the jersey, and I'm like, oh, it's that time of the year where they give out the Jackie Robinson jerseys at the promotional game. I want to say it's the 15th, but I think that's tax day.
It is indeed April the 15th, 1947. So it's
the same day as IRS Day. Tax cheats.
That is the anniversary, and the Los Angeles Dodgers do not deserve to celebrate it after their recent actions. But we are going to discuss and celebrate the life of Jackie Robinson again. We discussed 42 a couple years ago in another podcasting world, but we will be discussing the Jackie Robinson Ken Burns documentary next week. 4 hours, 2 parts. We discussed a lot of it when we discussed the baseball documentary, but this is going to kind of be an opportunity to just really hone in on his life and especially focus on his post-playing career, because there's a lot of really interesting material out there about his post-playing career.
For sure, and I just thought it was odd that in Queen of the Ring, there was like a 30-second clip of Jackie Robinson joining the MLB, and I was just thinking, I texted Jerome, like, our booking is incredible, because that sets up the next week perfectly, and we didn't even we didn't time that, so that,
You did not.
There you go.
All right, so for Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.